Hello, 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 everybody. I hope that you are doing quite amazing. I know that I am this evening, and welcome to Leadership Live 2021, week 28. 28. So we're in week 28, the Leadership Live. That also means we're in week 28 of 2021, and I am ecstatic to be here with you yet again this week. And for those of you all who are like, Lady, who are you? Well, welcome. That means that you must be new to Leadership Live. I am Dr. Renita. I am your host. I am just over the moon. And so here we go. Leadership Live is a sharing of journeys. It's a sharing of journeys. That's what we do every single week. We share leadership journeys. We share this knowledge so that you can apply it to your life, to your leadership, and all the wonderful things that you do. But who am I to be talking to you about this? Well, I am Dr. Renita L. Webb. I am an educational leadership strategist. That means that I help leaders who are aspiring or growing leaders to become more authentic in their leadership, to empower their fellowship. Yeah, I said fellowship. And at the end of the day, have a greater impact. I am also a wife and mother of four. Yes, four kids. I birthed two and I own two. And because of that part of my journey, I am also an author. I'm the author of Stepmom, Trials, Tribulations, and Triumphs, editions 1 and 2. Also, While You're Sleeping, The Perfect Children of All Ages book. Yes. She's an authoress. I am also a speaker. I am a veteran educator, having served Grace Kindergarten through college. I am a trainer. I am a mentor. I am a mentee. I am the founder of The Refining Life, whose mission is to provide you with opportunities to refine your mind, to shift your mindset so that you can lead a more positive and productive life. And we are gearing up for Refining the Mind Women's Conference, the seventh annual Refining the Mind Women's Conference on September 25th. Will be live and virtual. If you want more information, I can get that to you ASAP. I am also a queen. These crowns aren't for nothing. I am a queen. And I am a queen. I am the current reigning Mrs. Black, North Carolina. I am also the elite Southern Charms, North Carolina Ultimate Grand Supreme, and I have the honor of being the East Coast USA National Talent Performer of the Year, and I am and excited about being here with you tonight. But not only am I excited about being with you, I am excited about our guest. She is phenomenal. She is amazing. I have known her for a very long time, and you just never know where life is going to bring you back to. So let me stop hogging the screen and bring in this beautiful lady. Welcome, Dr. Emma.
Hi, Dr. Anita. It's awesome to be here, and I'm just loving your energy. You got me like just ramped up this evening. So thank you so much for having me here on Leadership Live. It's been an honor just awaiting this opportunity. So excited to be here with you and everyone else here tonight.
Well, I am excited for your yes. I am appreciative for your yes because you didn't have to say yes and you did anyway. But Dr. Emma, what I am going to do is depart myself from the screen for a few moments and allow you to introduce yourself to the audience as well as maybe tell them a little bit about your topic.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Emma Flack, and I'm so honored to be here. I have been doing a change leadership for probably almost 20 years now. So I'm excited to be here with you this evening to talk about that topic. But aside from that, just a little bit more about my background. So I am an executive coach. I've also done leadership development for many, many years, and certainly have done a lot around the change leadership area. In addition, I do have a passion around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's something that I do separately, but I also tend to weave that into a lot of my leadership facilitation and into my coaching. And so I'm so excited to be here with you. And I've been working with organizations and leaders for over 2 decades now, and just really passionate about what happens when organizations are going through change, what happens with leaders when that happens, and what's the best way for them to lead and engage their employees. And even outside of that, just thinking about other types of organizations and other spaces where we're all change leaders, regardless of our titles or the hierarchies that we're in. How do we lead change in our everyday lives? And so that's something that I'm looking forward to exploring with all of you this evening and with Dr. Anita as we engage in this conversation.
Well, yay. Okay. Okay, so I promised my audience every single week that the next week I won't let them down again. And so I never have let them down. Like we've been going strong for 27 weeks, and I promised them all the time
Okay.
that I'm not going to let them down. And as you all can see, just from the introduction, I've made good all over again. Yes, I have. Oh my goodness. So, Dr. Emma, there's just so many things. First and foremost, for you to work with so many different elements and to be able to weave things like diversity, equity, inclusion into your work in so many different realms is phenomenal. And this whole idea about change leadership. So I will tell you all, I was, as I'm, talking to potential guests, reaching out to people, and just looking at Dr. Emma's background, the idea of change leadership struck me. This has struck me to my core, especially when we are living in times where we are all going through changes that we may not be able to control, while also desiring to affect, lead, and cause change. It's something about in this very disruptive time where I think change leadership may be something that we all could embrace more and that is so greatly needed. So I said, change leadership. I don't really know all of what it is, but man, that sounds great. Can we talk about it? So thank you for once again saying yes. So Dr. Emma, could you just give us, if you were talking to somebody on the street and you just wanted to educate them about truly the gist of change leadership, what would you say? How would you make us and lay people and people who even speak leadership jargon, because not everybody does, how would you make us truly understand it?
Yeah, so the first thing I really think about is that change happens every day. So all around us, there's always things happening, whether they're big transformational things that are affecting us in our day to day, in our personal life, in our work life. And so because change happens every day, change leadership is something that is honestly an everyday behavior, right? And so really change leadership is not just about like, how am I going to be, what are the things I'm going to do as change is happening? But as a change leader, it's, what's the mindset, right? What's the behavior? What are the things that I want to do to inspire myself, but also inspire other people around me to go through a change, to experience a disruption in the most productive way as possible, in the most seamless way as possible. And so what I like to do first is say change leadership. A lot of times people confuse it with change management. And that's something I do as well. But change management, if any of you have experience, it really is kind of like, what are the processes and the tools and the things, the structural things that we do? Where change leadership really is about, how as an individual leader or how as individual people are we engaging other people, right? What is our ability to inspire and to connect with other people? How do we actually fuel them, right? As well as ourselves. And so as we kind of delve into that a little bit more, change leadership really is an everyday behavior, right? Just as change is constant, change leadership is also constant. And so this is not something that you do as a leader when okay, a specific thing is about to happen and now I'm going to be a change leader. Like, no, absolutely not. You should be doing certain things as a leader on an everyday basis so that when there is something disruptive or when there is something transformative happening, it's kind of just easy for you to slide into that, a change leadership. And so really it's like, what are the everyday behaviors? Like you should be already talking to people every day, right? You should already be engaging your teams or even change in our families, right? If we're already doing certain things as leaders within those settings, then when it's time to be a change leader, we already have some of the behaviors to be able to say, okay, you have the trust in me. We have the relationships where I'm about to introduce something to you or help you go through something that, hopefully we can get through together as we are navigating a change.
That's so good. So some of the things that I pulled out of what you said, you talked about being productive and being seamless. You talked about engagement, which I think is a huge word, and I want to chew on that a little bit more with you. And then you talked about everyday behaviors, you talking to people, trust, relationships. So the July soft skill of the month for me, that I'm sharing with people is communication. But the June soft skill was persuasion. And so I think that persuasion and communications oftentimes go hand in hand, but especially when you are attempting to affect change.
Mm-hmm.
But I love, so let's go back to this word engagement.
Yeah.
When you think about engagement and this what I feel like a preparatory time between when the change is needed and when you are just practicing these change leadership skills so that when the disruption happens, you're ready. And people they're not looking like, oh, you're a different type of leader now. No, it's back
Yeah.
to the idea of being seamless. So when you're thinking about engagement and change leadership, what are some of the key things that people need to do to engage others so that they're prepared for when disruption happens?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And as I think about engagement, it's really a wonderful foundation for change leadership. And so engagement really is not only like communications, of course, is a part of engagement. That's a way to engage people. And so even as you're engaging people through communication as a change leader, it's how do you understand the people that you're talking to? How do you understand the people that you're reaching? So that, in many ways we think communication is just the way that we speak or the way that we communicate as a leader, but actually it's about how do we understand those people that we're trying to reach to see what are the ways that I fine tune, the way I approach Dr. Renita versus the way I approach, this other colleague, so that I can communicate to them in the way that they understand. Also, I can try to understand what are the ways that they feel heard and understood so that I adjust and I modify my communication while still being me, right? So that I can reach them in a way that, they are connecting with the message or they're connecting with me as an individual. So absolutely, engagement is, kind of a cornerstone, actually, of change leadership, because you want to already have, kind of laid those bricks, so to speak, laid that foundation so that, hey, we're already in a certain place as two individuals, or if I'm a leader of a team, then you already kind of know, we already have a flow, we already have kind of a flavor to the way that we engage with one another, either through the way that we communicate or through the way that we're listening to one another, or me even understanding what are your needs, right? So how do I know that Dr. Renita feels included? How do I know that she feels heard or understood? How do I understand, parts of her personality, right? So that, we're already on that wavelength of engagement. And therefore, when it's time for me to do something else, or there's something that comes that maybe might be a little disruptive, then we already have that foundation. So that's really an excellent point that you bring, is honestly, that engagement really must be there. I can actually think of experiences that I've had with leaders of my own where, everything was great. We had a really good working relationship. We all got our things done, but I always knew when something disruptive was about to happen, because that leader would only call a meeting, when it was time to share some news, right? And so everybody on the team knew, there's a meeting on the calendar, somebody's leaving, right? Or there's something bad, we're about to hear something that we're not going to like, where there have been other leaders that I felt like, wow, we're having this constant conversation. It just never really stops, right? And so I already have the trust that, okay, even if they're calling a meeting and they're going to tell me something, then I already have sort of this two-way ongoing trust, in them, that I trust that whatever they're going to tell me, then, we're going to get through it. They're going to help me through it. So yes, engagement is critical.
Wow. So even in that, there are all these nuanced pieces. But what I really love that you brought to light is the idea of being authentic in adaptation.
Yes.
So because really, so I would say one of my greatest leadership experience was being a school principal, because it forced me into all of these different scenarios, and we were a new school building new things, and there was constant change. Like the school as a whole changed. We were attached to these other two entities that made one whole school, but we were kind of our own little bubble. And we were all new, we're all learning each other. But I think what made the biggest difference in our teaming was engagement, and that engagement came through another point that you brought up before. It was in relationships and trust. But they could only be built when I took the time to understand my staff, when I allowed them to hear me, the genuine me as well, for them to get to know me. As Yolanda Makumbe said here in the comments, she said, wow, listening is a top leadership skill. And it
Yeah.
is. We had to learn to listen to each other, to really learn the heartbeat of one another, so
Yeah.
that we would know how to adapt conversations, how to adapt other forms of communication, just to get things done and to inspire people while engaging them. We knew what questions to ask certain people and what activities we would ask people to do, and even to
Mhm.
lead. Because, to me, I feel like leadership always be fostering other leaders.
Mhm.
And so that adaptation still couldn't change who I was. I may be adapting to a person or
Yeah.
a group or a situation, but I was still adapting as Dr. Renita. And
Yeah.
so I think that authenticity, which is something that I always, whenever I'm working with leaders, the first thing we start with is you. Your
Yeah.
leadership starts here. It
Yeah.
doesn't start out there. They matter, but they don't, because if you don't know who you are and don't know what you're doing and know why you're doing it, you got to know your why. If you don't have that clue, you're going to walk into a situation attempting to engage, but you'll be so inauthentic because you don't even know you.
Yeah, that's really so powerful, even what you just said. So knowing your why. And so even as I hear you talking, right, it's about, how do I know who I am? How do I know my purpose? How do I even know my values? Because how can other people know me if I don't know those things of myself? And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about that this morning, authenticity, right? So as a leader, whether it's a change or not, it's like, how am I keeping it real? And that's something for me is like a term that I think about all the time. Am I being real, in the ways that I show up with people? And so authenticity, really comes first from you knowing yourself. So how do I show up? How do I even understand myself so that I know how to show up to these other people? But also authenticity leads to trust, right? And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but authenticity leads to trust. And so when we think about it in the context of change leadership, the people that we're walking beside, the people that we're leading, they can only begin a journey from where they are, and they tend to go with people that they can trust, right? They tend to be guided, or willing to be guided by people that they trust. And so as I connect the authenticity piece to what you were saying earlier about, knowing your why and knowing your purpose, it's, keeping it real is about, okay, how am I showing vulnerability, right? Sometimes vulnerability comes from storytelling. Sometimes vulnerability comes from saying, hey, I don't know right now, but I'm willing to figure this out with you. Sometimes it's about sharing our own experiences of when, maybe something didn't go quite right, or maybe we're not comfortable. I actually had a leader in the moment, share with me. I experienced a layoff back in 2016. And I remember that conversation with my leader. And, he shared his own insecurities and his own stories. And in fact, he was going to be losing his job a few months later. And so in that sense, it was like, okay, wow, like, even though I'm not comfortable, like, this is really bad news. I felt like, okay, I do trust what you're telling me. I do trust, that you are being honest and authentic and open with me, because you're willing to share. And maybe it doesn't have to be that drastic of an example, but, just the willingness to open up shows the human side of us as leaders, and how are we willing to at least let people see that side of us, so that, okay, they understand, okay, I'm being real with you. Even if I'm being real and saying, I don't know, at least you trust me when I'm telling you, hey, I don't know right now, but let me figure this out, and let me actually then follow through, right? Which is another big piece of authenticity. So thanks for raising that, because it was really heavy on my mind earlier today, just as I was thinking about this topic.
Absolutely. And the power of the follow through. That is a
Yes.
story that we could go on for days. But I also love that you bring up the power of honesty.
Mm-hmm.
There is something that I just have the utmost respect for, when somebody is honest with me when they tell me they don't know something. I think that sometimes we get caught up in these leadership titles, and we
Hmm.
have this false belief that the leader is the be all end all, the know all. But to go back to something else you noted in there, you used the word beside. These people we walk beside. You didn't say
Mm-hmm.
we walk in front of them. We walk beside them. And I think that as leaders, we forget that it's okay to not always be standing at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to sometimes be in the pack and have people sometimes even wonder, well, who's the leader of that group?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all are. And there are times where we can be okay with the step back and showing our trust in another leader within our organization and not being threatened by that, but showing our trust in them and allowing them to take a leadership role in something that we
Mhm.
completely step back from.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I've often said to people, if you're leading by a title, then you're not really leading, right? So even though, yes, there's a purpose for um, positions and titles and hierarchies and structures, leadership really is about like what is the collective shared responsibility of whatever this group is. It could be my family could be a group, right? Like I'm leading in my home, or if I'm leading in the workplace. And so, how are we all really responsible for the effectiveness of leadership happening, right? That experience of leadership, and I don't have to be the one that's calling the shots necessarily. Even if I have the title, right? Maybe I don't need to be the one calling the shots. And so, how am I actually allowing other people into this process? Because another really important part of change leadership is that you need to have kind of like, how do you create coalitions? How do you create the shared responsibility? Because people are willing to walk beside you, right? If you help them to be co-creators in the process. How do you help them to be co-creators in how are we going to get this done? How are we going to get through this together? How do you, inclusion that came up for me earlier too is the spirit of inclusion in your leadership, in your change leadership, as you think about like how do I actually understand what it's going to take to lead people through this, and so how do I actually invite them into the conversation, because I don't have to have it all figured out. And that's even authentic, right? In and of itself. I
Right.
don't have to have it all figured out. But how do I actually seek to understand their points of view, their experiences? How do I even empower people to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to let you step into this. I'm going to back up from this. And I'm going to actually have you to drive this, because maybe that's not my strong suit. Or maybe, maybe I need to take a step back because I'm too in the tunnel, right? And so I want to actually let somebody else come into it and share that responsibility with me. But in general, how do we, in the spirit of inclusion, have people to be co-creators of the solutions or co-creators of the experience or collaborators, before a change is happening, during a change. So that way they have the buy-in, and that's super important, is how do you involve people so they can actually feel like they're bought into it. And maybe it could be a positive change, or it could be something we all really just don't like that this is happening, but I made you feel like part of it. And therefore, like, that solidifies us walking together, us walking beside each other through that. The other really important piece around this inclusion is, how am I paying attention to who's in the conversation and who's not in the
Mm.
conversation?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because sometimes we think that we have it all figured out, and we think, oh, I understand all of my people, or I understand all of my groups of stakeholders. But how are we looking around and saying, like whose experience am I not capturing? Whose experience am I not understanding? Who's different from me or different from these other people who are all sitting at the table, that we're really not including, but they're really impacted? And it might seem like common sense, but it's so interesting how many teams that I've coached, how many leaders I've advised, where it's a simple question and you realize, oh wow, there was a huge gap in experience, somebody's experience that we really missed out on because we just simply didn't invite them into the conversation, or a representative, right, into the conversation.
That that is something that's incredibly powerful, really getting the 360 of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times we surround ourselves by like-minded people, which can be great when you're going for a similar goal. But if there is no variant in that path of thinking, you're going to miss something. I had a unique conversation with some colleagues of mine earlier today, and we were talking about something that needed to change, something had a concern about. And, we all had this feeling, but we had to start thinking about it from different angles. We couldn't just think about it from this one way. We couldn't Think about it from the area of frustration. What are we missing here? What could cause
Mhm.
other conflict later? We've got to think about all the other people involved, even if they're not sitting at the immediate table.
Yeah.
We have to be aware enough of our stakeholders or the
Mhm.
people we serve. I'm try not to use just leadership jargon. But our stakeholders, the people we're serving, the people who are going to be impacted by this, if we are not aware and are not empathetic to their needs because we aren't aware, then we can end up messing up something or causing a way bigger mess than it
Yeah.
had to be.
Yep.
But also, we need that feedback. We
Yeah.
need feedback from the entire sphere, not just the circle. We need the sphere. I
Yeah.
need the ins and outs and the all rounds so that we can truly make sure that we are serving in the way we intend to serve and
Mhm.
don't make unintentional missteps.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that's something that even with our best intentions, sometimes we overlook, right? And it's not out of spite or because we were seeking to exclude. But one thing that I would say as a practice is, how are we constantly evaluating every day? Whose experience do I not understand? What's an opportunity for me to get to know somebody that I totally maybe it's different for me, whatever different for me looks like, because we all have our unconscious biases, right? Our brains are wired that way just through life experiences. And so
Mhm.
something that I try to do is even in my approach to problem solving or executing or strategizing, I will actually seek somebody who I know is of a completely different personality than me, or maybe a completely different technical background. Even though it might be frustrating and it might be like, oh, why can't we just why can't you understand what I'm trying to do here? Like at the end, the end product or the end result or the strategy, it's a lot more inclusive and a lot more thoughtful, right? About what are we doing, who are we impacting. And so even if you try to do every day, kind of like seek to challenge yourself, it doesn't have to be because a change is happening, but just how do you get into even the practice of, I'm going to ask somebody to challenge me, I'm going to invite somebody into a conversation that maybe we don't always see eye to eye, or maybe we're just totally different. And so that kind of helps us to build that muscle so that, okay, when it is time to lead people through a change or come up with what is our change leadership strategy as a team, or even in my own strategy as a leader, then I'm already in the practice of seeking out people whose either experiences are different from me or whose opinions are different. And so that's just one way to, again, it happens every day. You build it every day so that when you're ready for a change, it's already just part of your way of working.
Wow. Wow. I love the idea of it being a muscle. You're constantly pumping the iron, making the muscle stronger.
Yeah.
But I have a question about something that you just a point that you just rose, and you talked about intentionally seeking someone who was going to challenge your way of thinking. And I think for some people that is very hard because
Mm-hmm.
offense is very easily taken.
Mm-hmm.
People feel offended, they go on the defense, and it's not necessarily always that way. Do you have any tips for people who are saying, okay, that sounds like a good idea, Dr. Emma, but how can I go into those types of situations and accept the challenge without the offense?
Yeah, so first, you need to get your own mind right. All right, so it's like you're about to go into this, and there's intentionality behind this, right? So I'm going to go talk to Dr. Renita because she has a completely opposite personality style from me, and we have, and I'm making this up. We do have similar backgrounds, but Dr. Renita has a completely different, scientific mind, so totally different from my qualitative social scientist mind. And I know that she's going to, ask me all these questions that maybe might get me riled up, or maybe she has a point of view. So what I have to do first is say, I'm going to be okay with this, right? Because what am I trying to do out of this experience? What am I trying to take away from this? And actually, even me thinking, who am I going to be able to help, right? By
Mm.
letting Dr. Renita challenge me or rip my plan apart or ask me 100 questions or whatever that is. And so by me thinking about who am I going to help from this process, then that allows me to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go into this conversation and I'm going to ask Dr. Renita, and I'm going to give her the permission to say, hey, shoot darts at me, tear this up, just like, just do whatever you need to do. And even if you agree with me, that's great. But I want you to help me understand it. Why do you agree with me, or why is this a good idea? And in that, I am going to actually listen and actively listen and not interrupt you. I'm going to listen to the whys. I'm going to listen to the what. And then there will be an opportunity for me to, ask you some questions. So even for me, it's like, I'm going to go into this with the mindset of, I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to interject and tell you all the reasons why, but I'm really going to go here to listen to your feedback and actively listen to your feedback. And then let's have a conversation at the conclusion of this, so that we can, close in partnership, right? Because we started with this idea of partnering in this conversation, but I would like to, show my appreciation and bring some closure to that. And then in the end, hopefully I'll have something that's a lot more refined, a lot more thought through than my original ideas. And so even with that, it's your own kind of readiness and preparation for it. But also, hey, Dr. Anita, I'm giving you permission. I welcome it. I'm completely open to your feedback, even if it's something that you think I don't like. I give you the permission to do that.
Wow. I wish you could see my note sheet. It is out of control right now. I take notes every week, but this note sheet is out of control. But I love every single one of those tips. Is, you got, it's you first. You have to walk into that conversation ready for it. But I also like the power in the permission. I am handing you, so this is a two-way power. I am giving you power right now to tear this apart. I might cry. I'll get over it. You be past it too. But I'm handing you this permission. But how powerful it is to understand your power to do that. You have the power to provide access or denial to another person's feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually that's, and I know we're sort of talking in the context of maybe peers, in this example, but even in, as we are perhaps in that hierarchical leadership position, and we're trying to get that coalition or that, support or that buy-in from our teams or for those around us, how do we even give them permission? Because sometimes when you have that power distance, people may not feel open to like, oh, you're my boss, or you're my superior to my boss, or whatever that is. And so you're asking me for my feedback, but how honest can I be with you? Right. If I'm sharing with you, hey guys, like, hey team, I'm trying to get to understand, is this train of thought that I'm having, is this plan going to be effective? Like, how does this resonate with you as you think about the change we're about to experience? Then I have to recognize my own privilege in that situation, my own power distance in that situation, to say, and I'm giving you full permission to be completely honest, to give the feedback on this plan, to come up with a different plan if you have some ideas. I actually want you to be in this ideation process with me. And how do I make that okay, right? So hopefully we have the foundation, that engagement that we talked about in the beginning, where once I approach you as my team, I don't want you to feel intimidated. And I want you to really be honest with me about, like, what do you really think about this plan? What do you think about the way that I'm proposing that we lead this change? Because I need you to actually help lead this with me. And so how am I giving you permission, just like in that other example, how am I giving you permission, direct reports or whoever this group is, to say, oh yes, we can be completely honest with her and tell her that this really is just terrible, or we have some other suggestions or ideas, and in that conversation, I'm going to be silent and I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen actively so that I understand where they're coming from, and I may ask some questions to better understand. But I'm not going to be the one. And I love that comment. You must be humble. Leaders must be humble, and absolutely. So how are we vulnerable and humble and open enough to say, I want us all to be able to get through this together successfully. And so therefore I'm giving you the permission. Hopefully I don't have to say those words, but I may intentionally say, I'm going to give you the permission to rip this thing apart, or let's figure out something that's better, because I need you, right? I need you to be with me. I'm not leading this by myself, right? And so that even is humility, right? Is that I can't be successful in this if we're not in this together.
Okay, so the idea of needing someone else. So when we talk about the idea of relationship,
Mm-hmm.
from relationships in business to relationships at home to relationships that you're building to if you want to have a boo, you know, this whole idea of needing. And we are living in a generation and a time where we are practicing and taught and yelled independence, but then we talk about the need for interconnection, the need for somebody else to do something. And it's just, oh my goodness, it's finding that balance,
Yeah.
especially as Black females. Let's be real here. We are touted on about being strong and independent. And to say that you need somebody is sometimes seen as a sign of weakness. But to me, I think it's a sign of strength. You see yourself, you know what you can do. But
Yeah.
but okay, so that blew my mind. Just thank you for saying that out loud. But here's the other thing I wanted to bring up. So you brought up three P's. You talked about permission, you talked about power distance, and you talked about privilege. And so you talk about these things and our desires to really get other people engaged. We really want them to be bought in. We want them to take ownership of this thing. But then the thing that people fear the most is the idea of the repercussion. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm truly honest about this, how do I know they won't retaliate when I tell them this is the most horrible piece of junk I've ever seen in my life? What were you thinking? One, please note, people, you need to sprinkle that with some salt or a little bit of sugar, make it a little savory, make it tasty for somebody to swallow. But will there be repercussions? But that too goes with trust. As leaders, we've got
Yeah.
to watch how we react
Yes.
and not just in the moment.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. And so that's really important. So how do you demonstrate to people that actually it is okay, right? And that would take some time, right? That takes a repeatable pattern, right? For people to be able to see, okay, yeah, we know that if we're completely real with her, then it's fine. Like nothing's going to be at risk here. And that's why I mentioned at the beginning, change leadership is constant. These are everyday behaviors. And so it's like, how do you show, even in the micro actions, even in the day-to-day actions, when there's not really something big at stake, how do you show that, hey, it's okay for you to even disagree with me, right? In this conversation, or it's okay for you to think that this is not a good idea, but how am I showing you that, not only in the moment as I'm responding to whatever it is that you're telling me, but even in the long run, how do I show you that, hey, this is not going to show up in your performance evaluation or whatever, or even if you're working with someone, in the community, or someone, in your own personal business, that, hey, our business relationship continues, even though we didn't agree on this thing, or we can still do work together. So how are you even showing in the long run? And I think that's obviously, you have to show that repeatable, pattern of behavior to show that, okay, she really means that, or that person really means that. Therefore, when it's time for some really big, disruptive thing, that I know that I can speak my mind and I can have a different opinion or offer different ideas, or say that this is a terrible idea, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. So with that in mind, and creating these consistent behaviors that encourage people to trust you, I think about a leadership sector that a lot of times we leave out. And it goes to the song that always plays in my mind when I think about this is, I believe the children are the future. I believe the kids are our future. And a lot of times we get into this place. And I would say a lot of times I won't even say it's just the Black community. I will say in the culture from probably 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe a little bit in the 90s, we get into this do as I say.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it. Why do I have to do that? Because I said so. So we get slightly offended by questions from the children. And if we are going to build this future of leaders, how do we, even with kids, who we are hoping to nurture into leadership? Because my hope is, no matter what my kids do, they're going to be a leader and do it well.
Yeah.
They may have this high hierarchical title, or maybe they are. Maybe they run everything. I still want them to be effective as leaders. I want them to be touchable as leaders. I want them to be understood, authentic, empowering. I want them to be impactful leaders in whatever they do. But we talk about this consistent thing, and we talk about really flexing this muscle and working it out every day. So you talked about this being an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about change leaders who are constantly, because the only thing constant in the world is change, constantly dealing with change and constantly preparing for change, even inconsistency, which is totally oxymoronic, but there's change in consistency. What are some of the tools when we're talking about people who are different in different walks of life?
Yeah.
People who
Yeah.
are stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, they're school teachers, they're CEOs, they are nonprofit leaders, they are ministry leaders, they
Mm-hmm.
may be anywhere. What are some kind of basic, we can all do this to really start working out? Because if nothing else in the pandemic, we may have learned that we need to work out more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it's so some things that come to mind is, and I love that you brought up earlier, by the way, around children, and I want to come back to that point because I think there's it's okay to welcome curiosity and the way that we respond to that. But I definitely want us to come back to it. And so some of the tools are just some of the practices that I think are important. Wherever you're leading, you could be leading in your family, you could be leading in your church, wherever you are, is how do you know your people, right? So how do you even know the people around you? And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but, start by understanding what's important to the people around you. What do they care about? One of the big questions that's asked in any change is what's in it for me, right? And that's just a question that you think about, like, who are each of these people and how do you answer that question? What's in it for me, for each of those people? So how do you even understand them outside of any change on a regular basis? And so, really think about that. What's important to them, what drives them, what motivates them. Also, like, how do you know who the influential people are? Sometimes it's not the people with the fancy titles. Many times it's not the people with the fancy titles. So if you're working in a school
Just a
system,
moment there. Honey,
yes,
like, the most powerful people in the school system, and I wanted to say in school system, and a lot of systems, if you can get to that administrative assistant,
oh
that's
yes,
a powerful, they know everything, they see everything, they speak to everybody, they know how
yes,
everybody. Ooh, that's a powerful position.
yes,
A lot of
yes.
people sleep on that position.
It is a very powerful position that demands a lot of respect. So administrative assistants, and even other roles, right? So within whatever the hierarchy is, or even in a flat organization, how do you know the people that everybody listens to, right? Whether it's in a good way or not a good way, because you need to know who those people are. And so that way, how do you engage those people really intentionally so that, when there's something that's about to happen or something that we're preparing for, of course, you try to engage everyone, but how do you really tap those influencers to say, okay, I just want to understand how you are receiving this, because they're also communication vehicles, whether we welcome them or not. You need to understand who are these influencers because everybody's going to them, right? And also, they're an important feedback loop. So because what's really going on the street, what's the word on the street, what are people really saying? And so know who your influencers are, know your stakeholders and what's important to each of those people. Another thing to remember is always expect resistance, okay? Especially if it's a change that may not be a positively received change. Resistance is actually good, okay? Because sometimes a change is introduced and you don't hear any feedback.
That's a
That's a bad
problem.
sign. You need to hear something. What are the people, what's really going on? And so know that resistance is actually good because the resistance is telling you a story. And yes, you may get positive feedback. You may get feedback that, okay, everybody's good, we're cool. But resistance tells you where you need to focus in a little bit more on, or what are the areas for a little bit of extra effort, or okay, I need to maybe go back and clarify this, or maybe I need to do a little bit more of a certain type of engagement. And so just know that the resistance is normal and it's not a bad thing when you see it. Actually, I love it because I love messy. I like challenges. So to me, it's like, okay, let me figure out how to solve this puzzle over here when I see resistance. So no, that is natural. And then, the other thing is ask for feedback. Sometimes we think that people are just going to give it to us, but please ask for feedback. And feedback can be qualitative, random conversations. Feedback can be quantitative, but just really make that as part of, how do you understand that the outcomes that you set out in the beginning of your plan, how do you know that you are reaching that? And don't wait till the very end of an initiative. You need to be collecting feedback along the way. And again, you don't have to be sending a survey every month, but how do you at least have the conversations or talk to your influencers or kind of like test the pulse of how are people receiving this? What's going on? What are people curious about? How are you engaging? And so that's super important and sometimes overlooked. And it's like, oh, we're going to do this at the end. And I'm like, wait, you had an opportunity like 6 months ago for something that you didn't even know that people didn't understand, or they didn't get it, or completely missed the mark and you didn't even know it. And so how do you just iteratively get that feedback? And so those are a few things that I will offer to you. And again, these are like everyday things you can be doing so that when it's time for a change to happen, then, people are not like suspicious or thinking that, okay, what are you trying to pull on me? And so just how do you do these things on a day-to-day basis?
Right, right. And so I love the idea of expecting resistance and to welcome it. I mean, you all look at what's hot on the market right now: resistance bands, booty bands. All of it's about resistance, and it's those bands and that
It builds
resistance.
the muscle.
Right.
Yes.
You go to the gym, you gotta get your it's all about resistance. That's what builds the muscle. Without the resistance, and it's increased resistance. So like it's not even just about you start with 30 pounds. Eventually you need to build to 90. Keep going. Because your muscles get stronger the more resistance you require to keep them strengthened. Or keep them growing in strength. And if you don't want to be a bodybuilder, I would advise you to stop at certain numbers. And I just want to be toned. I got goals not met. I got goals, but I know that I won't reach those goals if I don't have the resistance. So I love the idea that in order for us to be effective change leaders, in order for us to be effective change agents, we've got to deal with resistance. And, a very popular word now is resilience. There is no way you can have resilience if you never deal with resistance.
Yeah. And resilience, there's actually a few definitions that float out there when it comes to resilience. And so some people consider resilience to be, how like endurance, right? That's one way to think about it. So, how do I endure? How do I kind of weather whatever the challenges are? Another way to think about resilience, which is in a lot of recent literature, is, how do I manage my energy? How do I respond to stress? How do I actually ready myself in a preventive way, right, to deal with stress? And so there's a few things out there, but yes, I love the kind of like the partnership, or I guess the balance that you're posing here between resilience and resistance. I think is a really powerful way to think about that.
Mm-hmm. Because all opposition isn't bad.
That's right.
And I think that goes back to the challenge and the offense. If we are so afraid of opposition, we will never get stronger. We just won't get stronger because you will never have that resistance. You got to have the pushback in order to strengthen your leadership muscle, in order to strengthen any muscle. Once again, I got goals not realized, but I got hope. It's not over. The only way to strengthen that is that you have to face the challenges. You have to deal with it, and deal with it in a way that it can be constructive. If you put that wall up at the moment you hit adversity, the moment you hit a challenge, nope, boom, 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 look like a cartoon.
Yeah.
That wall goes up so fast. I'm not dealing with that. You can keep the wall. No, that's not how it works.
Yes. And I think that's another part of why that mindset we talked about earlier, that's why it's important for you to do the work on yourself first. So even before you're about to do anything, right? So how do I get my mind right? How do I, because there are times that we receive feedback that, okay, maybe we didn't like it at first and we say, ouch, and maybe next week I might think about it and be like, you know what, that feedback was right. That they were right. Maybe I didn't like it. But even like as we invite the feedback, so to your point, Dr. Anita, it's how do we avoid putting the wall up, so that people start to know that, right? Oops, can't talk to her, can't say that. And so how do you even get your mind right, or get your presence, or your the way that you show up together, so that if you do convey something, or you are the face of a change, or you are trying to influence other people, then they know that it's okay for me to have the resistance, or to say, hey, I need to share some feedback with you, whether it's my feedback or I'm hearing this elsewhere. I need to know that you're not going to shut down, right? And so how do you even prepare yourself mentally to say, hey, this is all a part of the journey? And what is the cost to me as a leader to shut down? What is the cost for me putting that wall up? What is the cost for me not knowing what people really think? So that could be a financial cost. It could be a turnover. It could be disengagement. It could be this thing is going to fail. So what is the cost? And so how do I embrace the mindset of it is going to be okay for me to get negative feedback. It is going to be okay to get resistance, because that's going to inform me of what do I need to do more of, what do I need to do differently. And it's not just about me, remember. So how do the people I have around me, how do we think differently about this thing? Because that's data. That's data. And I'd rather have some data than to have nothing at all and then just be blindly following the plan.
Now okay, I'd rather have some data than no data at all. Because when people don't talk to you, and this includes anybody in your policy, when the people are not talking to you, you are not getting data at all, and you will be flying blindly.
That's right.
I know everybody tells me dip out of the screen. I tell all my guests every week I'm my own production, and when things start looking like they're going on low battery, I probably need to plug them up. So I apologize for jumping out of the screen for a second.
Good. Good.
But let's go back. So this is an important sector and a perfect segue to bring to a group of people who we often don't invite challenges from, and it's going back to children and our future generations and their curiosity. And sometimes we take their questions as challenge, and sometimes it's really from a place of I don't know, I really don't understand this. And so it goes to a communication issue as well. But when we are those are some of the people, we bring it back home, whether you have children or you are someone's child, all of us are somebody's child, even if we got here somewhere. But dealing with your familial unit, whatever it looks like. Sometimes we run into these big, huge issues when we put walls up, and then we wonder why our families break up. We wonder why we're not able to build these kids in the way we wanted to build them. We wonder why our parents stopped talking to us. So I think about teenagers. Teenagers a lot of times will throw up walls because they just don't know how to deal, and it's easier just to stay in there. Whatever's going on out there, it's easier for me to be in here and you to be out there because I don't even know how to deal with you, and I'm already frustrated with myself. So, there are a lot of people who are still in these adolescent mindsets that it's way easier for me not to deal with you. I'm going to go in here. But when we're building up children, we're building up the future of our world. What are some tips that you may have, because as we are getting closer to the end of our time, I promise you all, hours have never gone faster by than during leadership. But as we're building the future, as we're dealing with that curiosity, how and why and what should we do with that?
Yes, so for me, it's really interesting because I have nieces and nephews, and it's I love it when children ask questions, right? I don't actually have children biologically, but it's interesting when they ask questions. And how do we make that okay? How do we make it not a situation where you said earlier, because I said so, right? That's like a close-ended, like no further discussion. So that's the biggest way to kill the creativity and kill the curiosity. And so how do we, create the environment, create the conditions in our homes or in our families where it's okay to ask the questions, right? It's okay for them to. And what I love about children is that they will ask you why, and then you answer, and then why, and why is that? And why is that? But that makes us think. And so sometimes as adults, maybe it's because we don't feel like answering, or we don't know the answer, or we're lazy, right? And so it's like, but how do we, really inspire that curiosity and the questions that we have answers to? Okay, let's answer the question. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes my niece, she's 6 years old, very curious. And, my sister Carla, that's her daughter. And she would ask a lot of questions. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? TT is a doctor. I'm Dr. TT, right? I'm Dr. And I don't actually know, but let's actually find the answer together, right? And so sometimes it's out of the realm of my knowledge, And I'm like, you know what? Let's look that up. Let's see what the answer is to that. Sometimes we might be watching a movie, and so how do we, help them to be curious in a way that is really healthy, and together we learn, right? And so I think we need to make that an okay condition. And in the case of adolescents, obviously there's a lot that sometimes they're going through where maybe they don't feel understood, or they don't feel heard, or maybe we're just on two different wavelengths and we don't communicate. We're not on the same radio signal, or whatever that the term is, right? And so it's how do we listen more actively as the adults in the situation, right? How do we find different ways to ask the questions, or find the different ways to at least again, give permission, and whatever those words are, to say, hey, open the door at least to the conversations. Open the door to say, maybe we're disagreeing, but let's try to understand why. And then sometimes the why could be a very justifiable case as an adult, but how do you help them to understand this is the reason behind the decision, this is the why behind the decision, this is the business case behind that. And even if at the end of the day we don't agree with it, at least I'm giving you the respect as a person to explain to you, why this is. And so whether it's young children or adolescents, how do we at least, empower them to be curious, but also empower them through the respect that we're showing them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, we are in our last few minutes of our hour. Is there anything else you would just like, before we go, you have got to know this thing?
Well, one thing that I want to really underscore is that we're all leaders, right? And so leadership is not about a title or a hierarchy, even though that happens in many of our lives, is that we all lead each and every day. And so even as we think about the concept of change leadership, we have all gone through a change journey, right? Wherever we live, whatever our occupations are in the last 18 months or so. And so just know and understand that, everything that you're going through has been something that has built you as a change leader. And so think about the lessons and really take an opportunity to reflect on, maybe there's some things that you felt like you did really well, especially in our homes, in our environments where many of us had to work and live in the same environment. Some of us were in the same household, working with people that we love. And sometimes that can even be a challenging experience, whether they're grown people or little people. But just really think about what are some of the lessons that you learn from that, because you will continue, right? Whether it's in your household or whether it's in your place of work. And so what might you bring, as you look forward, as you maybe go back to whatever normal looks like in the future? And how might you take some of these lessons that we talked about today, as we think about change leadership, that every day is an opportunity to be a change leader and to really explore and understand not only who you are, but also like, how do you look around and constantly have that point of view about the people around you, what's important to them, and how do you walk beside them, right? In a way that's meaningful for both of you. So those are my parting words. And I'm so grateful. Dr. Renita, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and a delight. I've had a lot of fun with you this evening, and hopefully this was helpful to somebody out there.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I will say, I know after this, people are like, "Ooh, Dr. Emma, where have you been all my life?" I know that's been somebody's reaction. If they want to keep up with you, follow you, stay connected with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, thank you for offering that. So the best way would be on LinkedIn. So I am on LinkedIn as Dr. Emma Flack. And so that will have my contact information, and it's the quickest and easiest way to find me. So I look forward to talking and chatting and collaborating with anybody who wants to talk.
Absolutely. Well, LinkedIn Livers, I'm so glad to have you on board with us, our Facebook family, our YouTube family, and anyone who is having the opportunity to view this. Welcome. I'm so glad you are here now, whether it's this evening and in the morning when you're catching a replay in the afternoon. Make sure you let us know that you were here. If it's a replay, throw hashtag replay in the comments, but just let us know you were here. We're so grateful for you. And Dr. Emma, I am so grateful for you. I promise everybody every week that I'm not going to let them down, and I keep my word. I keep my word. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I am above the moon, above the moon. So thank you again. Everyone out there, this has been week 28 of Leadership Live, and I will be back here with you again next week for week 29 of 2021, Leadership Live 2021, with another phenomenal guest. So just be ready. If you have missed the past 27 weeks, or you were tardy for the party tonight, know that they are all available on replay on YouTube and Facebook. They're starting to trickle on LinkedIn. I just recently got the honor of being able to go live on LinkedIn. So welcome, welcome once again, LinkedIn viewers. But you can go back and catch them all. It's just been a great year thus far, and we're only a little bit over halfway through it, and we have so much more to learn and so many different ways to grow. I will also say mark your calendars to my female leaders for November 13th. I got something cooking up for you. Mark your calendars. And also for my females out there, Refining the Mind Women's Conference 2021, the 7th annual, will be September 25th. So mark your calendars September 25th and mark your calendars for November 13th. Just be ye also ready. Block out the day. But I'll be back here again next Monday at 9 o'clock. And as always, I encourage you to keep your leadership all the way live. See you next week. Bye.